Hi everyone, Amy here, and I have a paper piecing technique to share with you today. Now this stamp set that I'm going to be using is called You Gnome Me. You Gnome Me. Wow, that's hard to say. Anyway, it's from My Favorite Things, and my adorable little daughter got it for me for Christmas. And I have an old paper pad here. I will link it if it's still available, but it was donated to me, so I have no idea if it's still around. And here's the cards that I'm going to make for you today with these little Copic colored cutie gnomies. So I'm going to stamp a few of these stamps out in my mini Misty here. I have some 85-pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White. That's what I'm stamping on for the images. And I'm going to use Gina K Amalgam ink. And this is a Copic friendly ink, which if you are using Copics or other alcohol markers, you want to make sure that you have a Copic friendly ink so you don't have any bleeding or anything when you go to color it in. And now I'm just taking a couple scraps from this paper pack, and I'm just going to stamp down parts of the image that I want to cut out and paper piece onto the final project. As you can see, I'm struggle bus here, not even thinking, oh yeah, the magnet's in the way of the other stamps. So I tape it down and still forgot to get rid of the magnet. Jeez, I don't know what my problem is today. Anyway, I finally got it sorted and stamped it until it was nice and black, and then I fussy cut it out. Now I'm cutting off the feet and the other little pieces parts of the Gnomie because I really just want his pants to be this fabulous striped pattern paper. So I fussy cut that out, and then I have my memento pen. And this is just an optional step, but it really does kind of kick it up a notch when you do paper piecing. If you take a black marker like this, like a felt tip marker or even your black Copic, and just carefully go along the edge where you cut it, it will really give it a more finished look. And it won't show the white core of the paper, so it'll help it kind of, blend in with the design a little bit better. And here I've got it figured out. I don't have the magnet in my way this time, but I stamp another little piece from that same paper pack so it coordinates. And I just cut out his little gnome hat here. And this one, as you can see, is a lot easier to cut out. Now here I thought I was filming me coloring this in for you. These are the colors that I used on that little gnome. But I realized that it wasn't actually filming. So sorry about that. I'll go ahead and color in this little cutie for you. I do have it sped up. But I do kind of a scribbly, messy sort of coloring. That's kind of my style, a little bit more graphic. And I'm just using some warm grays in the beards of both of these gnomes. And you can see I'm kind of squiggling around and maybe even doing little dots because it kind of gives it a little bit of texture, like a beard would have. And I'm using one of the really dark warm grays to fill in the boots. And as you can see, I have a fine point tip on my grays. I'm slowly working through my Copic markers and replacing the chisel nub with a fine tip nub. So it's obviously optional, but I don't tend to use the chisel nib all that much. So starting with my grays and a couple other of my Copics, I've started to switch those over just because it's nice when you have little fine detail parts of a stamp that you want to color in. Sometimes it's easier with that little fine tip rather than trying to do it with the brush tip on this sketch marker. So I'm just coloring in some skin tones here. I want to make this one a little bit darker skin tone. And this one I'm not going to do paper piecing. I'm just going to color him all the way in. So I'm just working through the colors. I tend to go light to dark every once in a while. I will go dark to light. But it's totally preference and kind of whatever I feel like doing in the moment. So now I get this pretty teal color and decide to color in a shirt with that, and I'm kind of grabbing other markers as I go. Honestly, I'm just winging it and having fun coloring in these adorable little images. But if you are interested in my coloring style, I can link a previous video in the description box below. I think it's labeled something like Coloring for the Lazy Crafter. So as you can tell, I don't like to take a whole lot of time with anything, so if that suits your fancy, then I will link that video for you to check that out. But now I'm just kind of coloring in his belt using that same dark warm gray that I used on his boots, and then I'm going to bring in some bright red for his pants and for his hat. I don't know why, maybe it reminds me of like has a Goofy that always wore like bright red pajama pants with like the flap opening in the back. It's always kind of weird, but I don't know, maybe that's subconsciously what I had in my mind, but I like the red, and I'm coming in with a deeper shade of the red just to kind of add some shading on the sides and give his hat a really round cone type of look. Just kind of filling in these little tiny bits, and then I will come in, this is a size 10 Sakura white gel pen, and I'm just adding some dots onto his hat and a couple little highlights in various other places on the image. And I do come back and do it as well on the other gnome, but it doesn't show up quite as much. But that little guy's colored. He's mainly colored, but we're going to attach those pieces that we cut out of the pattern paper. I'm just going to use some liquid glue and my tweezers here to kind of hold it. Once I get the gunk off of them, they're kind of stuck together. But I'm just going to use liquid glue on the back and then just kind of piece these little pattern paper chunks down onto the little gnome. So obviously super cute, just coloring them in freehand, and then you have the option of drawing freehand with, you know, your Sakura gel pen if you want to add some other little details, or this is just a fun way to use up some paper scraps or some of that pattern paper that you've been hoarding, and kind of add a lot of fun detail. Now if you want to take a screenshot, these are all the colors that I use for both the images together, if that helps you. And again, I'm just coming in here with the little gel pen just to add highlights. It mainly just shows on his boots and his buttons, but I'm just going to fussy cut this out. Now these are my actual fussy cutting scissors. I used my Tim Holtz ones, which are fine, but they have a bit of a serrated edge, and I find that these cutter bee scissors do an even better job. So these are usually my go-to for fussy cutting. Now I believe there probably are coordinating dies for this stamp set if it's still available, so that's an option, but I don't mind fussy cutting. So now here I have some post-it tape, and this is actually a side fold A2 size card base of 110 pound cardstock. It's Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, and once I get it straight, I'm just using the grid on my glass mat. I just use some antique linen distress oxide, and now this is a hybrid ink, so it's partially dye ink and partially pigment, so it's really good for stamping and ink blending and even watercoloring. So this is definitely one of my favorite types of inks, and actually it was the first kind of complete set that I ever collected. So just giving my distress oxide some love here and stamping these cute little mushrooms from the stamp set. I'm just doing an odd number just because I find that visually pleasing to the eye. So 2 of the bigger ones and 1 of the smaller. And then I'm going to do 3 as well on the inside just to kind of continue the theme onto the inside of the card and give it a little continuity from the front. So I'm just stamping these with the little acrylic blocks. You can absolutely use your MISTI or your stamping platform if you're a little nervous about freehand stamping. And here I have Festive Berries. This is another distress oxide. I felt like it would go well with the red on the cute little gnomie. So I'm just stamping this a couple times, and it says, "For a friend like gnome one else." And I will end up stamping on the inside of the card as well. But here I decided, since he's sitting on the ground so cute, he needed a shadow. So I'm just using a simple gray colored pencil here and just quickly sketching just a little bit of a gray shadow just to give him some grounding underneath where he's sitting. And then I will use some foam tape here and my corner chomper just to give it some interest here, just on the one corner. So this has a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch rounded option, and I just decided to do that just to give it a little something interesting on it. And I have some foam tape pieces here just to give the little gnome some dimension on the card. But otherwise it's pretty simple, and I didn't want the background to take away from the cute little gnome, so that's why I just did that antique linen, just to kind of give the illusion of a background without taking away from the stamp. I'm going to do the same sort of thing here. This is one of my favorite stencils from A Colorful Life Designs. It's called Grove Trees. Now I am legit struggle bus here. Guys, do yourself a favor with this stencil and use pixie spray, because I made it work, and thankfully I was just using like a light neutral, but this would have been loads easier if I would have just taken a moment to spray the back of this with some pixie spray and hold it down. It would have worked a lot easier for me, but I absolutely love how this turned out. I'm totally going to do this again because it's it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but I promise you can see it in person and in the photos, and it's just so subtle but pretty in the background, and I just love how that turned out. So that kind of set the stage for this cute little gnome, and I busted out a different sentiment. And I'm going to use Rustic Wilderness, which is yet another Distress Oxide, and it goes really well with his little outfit. So I'm stamping this a couple times to make sure it's nice and dark, and it says, "You know me so well." And then on the inside I have the other sentiment that I had on the front of the other card, but I'm using that same green. And it again says, "For a friend like gnome other or gnome one else." So funny. I'm just fumbling right over these words here. And then I decided to take this other little cutie with the flowers from the stamp set and stamp him down, again using just that subtle antique linen color, just to give some continuity on the inside of the card, to bring something special and unexpected on the inside, but still simple, and not going to overtake the inside. So you have plenty of room to write a greeting to your recipient. So after I stamped this a few times, I'm struggling to get it stamped well in the middle, but I attached all the pieces, and here's the finished cards. So here's the first one. You can see the only dimension is really on the gnome. It's got that rounded edge. Then on the inside, "You know me so well." So I just kind of reversed the two sentiments. And then this one, same thing, "You know me so well." And then the other sentiment on the inside. But see that tree in the back, those trees in the background. I love how that turned out. So I hope this gives you some ideas to use up that pattern paper, or fun new ideas for coloring. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I appreciate you watching. Thanks. Bye.